Hi there, I'm Ben Pearce and welcome to the Tech World Human Skills Podcast. Every episode we talk through how to thrive in the tech world, not just survive. Now, if you want me to work with your team, just give me a shout. I love to help teams be more influential, memorable and successful with their stakeholders. Head over to www.techworldhumanskills.com to book a chat. Hi folks and welcome to the Tech World Human Skills Podcast. So, the madness of Tech Show London is behind us and I've sat down with another great guest to continue with some learning. And today we're thinking about the skills you need to be a leader in the modern world. I mean, things are changing pretty rapidly. And maybe the skills that you need to lead successfully, maybe they're changing too. So our guest today is a bit of an expert in modern leadership. He spent many years leading consultancy and engineering teams at Microsoft. And then he led coaching programs for the Microsoft leadership community and even got a Guinness World Record for it. And now he runs his own coaching company, Citium Solutions. So please welcome to the show, Panos Malakoudis. Panos, it is brilliant to have you with us.
I love being here. Thanks for inviting me, Ben.
Well, no, the pleasure and the privilege is all mine. Now, full disclosure, I've had the privilege of knowing you for many years. We worked together many years ago back at Microsoft, but then we haven't really seen each other for years. But caught up and thought it would be great to record a podcast together. But for all of those people that don't know you for years, like I have, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
The way you presented me, I feel like 80 years old. Many years in this industry.
I'm sure when we first met, I had a full head of hair and your hair was black. But that's for people on YouTube to decide whether there's any changes there.
Yeah, less full for me as well. So no worries there. Exactly as you said, I've spent more than 2 decades in Microsoft. Started back in Greece, my home country, and then I moved to the UK. I was always in big tech. Before Microsoft, I was working in telecom, routers, computer networks, all those things. Then moved to Microsoft as an engineer in the past. So I do have an engineering background. That's my trait. Moved to leadership, did that for about 10, 11 years. Moved to learning and development. And after about 22 years in Microsoft, I figured, well, that's probably enough, isn't it, right? So let's get all that knowledge of engineering, technology, leadership, big tech, big organization, learning and development and coaching, and let's see if I can do something of my own. So I started my own company a few months back, Citium Solutions, and we specialize in really leadership development for the age of AI, because you were right on the money there. Leadership is changing, and it is changing at an accelerated pace, at a dizzying pace almost. So how can we help leaders and aspiring leaders really develop or rediscover sometimes those human competencies they need for the age of AI?
Okay. Well, before we dig into that, and dig into it we will, I'm really interested and intrigued by this Guinness World Record that you have got. So before we dig into this, what is the Guinness World Record that you've got?
I think I need to remove it from my LinkedIn profile because most people ask me about this. It's not an obscure Guinness World Record about the number of somersaults we did in a day. I got it right back here on the wall. Actually,
I can see it. Yeah, behind your head. Yeah.
That's the real thing. That's the real thing. So it is a Guinness World Record we got when I was leading the coaching program in Microsoft for the biggest coaching program in the world, in terms of how many sessions we delivered in a year. And if my memory, because I cannot read from the back of my head, if my memory serves me right, it's about almost 5,000. Coaching sessions in a period of the year. So it was pretty amazing. Kind of the experience.
And that was coaching Microsoft leadership community, and through the program that you arranged there, you helped facilitate 5,000 coaching sessions between the leaders and coaches.
Exactly. It was leaders and other employees as well. That or part of the organization had 60,000 people. So when we started, the aspiration and the bet was, what if we offer coaching to 60,000 employees? What will happen? And it was such an amazing experience, because we started asking around, has anybody done this? And everybody was saying, you know what, not really. So we didn't have anybody to learn from.
Yeah.
And we still did it, right? So it was scary and it was fascinating and exciting. And we got a Guinness World Record at the end.
Yeah. Woo-hoo. And so what did happen? You know, so you were asking yourself, what happens if we offer coaching to these 60,000 people? You know, what did happen?
Well, initially we figured we would hear from other organizations that had done it in the past. But the more we asked the question, and we asked the International Coaching Federation, we really asked the bodies and the organizations that were supposed to know. And they did know. And they said, no, nobody has gone and said, we'll offer coaching to 70,000 employees. Then the next best thing we could do is kind of take an educated guess. Yeah. Which is exactly what we did. And we said, okay, if we open up coaching, and we say to career coaching at the time, and we say to 60,000 people who would like to get some career coaching, how many people do we think would sign up? And we took a wild guess and we said, 10%? Let's go with this. Nobody has a better guess. It was scary how accurate that 10% was.
Okay.
It was we hit the 10% within the first couple of months, and then we nudged it a little bit even further, but that 10% was spot on.
Okay, fascinating. And then there is the Guinness World Record right behind you. Oh, brilliant. Well done.
Thank you.
Well, let's move on from that then, and let's get to the matter at hand. So, what we're talking about today is, and the title of this episode is 5 human competencies that every modern leader needs. And I guess the key word I'm going to pull out of that is modern, right? So 5 human competencies that every modern leader needs. And by that, I guess we're kind of inferring that leadership is changing. But is it? So is leadership changing? How and why?
That's a great question, Ben. Leadership is changing for a couple of different reasons. The competence is not necessarily, but leadership is changing. Leadership is changing because the focus is changing. When COVID hit, the focus of leadership also changed. Empathy before COVID, was number 10 in the list of competencies that people need from their leaders. It was very high up in the list. After COVID, it jumped to number 3. So the environment and the developments affect what people expect from their leaders. Now, because of technology and because of AI and the acceleration that AI has in changing the social fabric almost of the world, that also introduces that need for leadership to change and the priorities and the focus of leadership to change in the same way that empathy increased in importance right after COVID. So when we say kind of the 5 competencies every modern leader needs is, how does the modern technology, how does AI specifically change that focus on what leaders really need to be working on in terms of their own personal development as leaders?
Okay, so I guess what we're thinking about is AI is pretty new. So lots of people are rapidly adopting it. There's lots of rapid change that's happening. People's business processes are changing. People's business models are changing. People's tool chain that they're using is changing. So there's all this rapid change going on at the moment. And so it's, how do you lead your team through this and also take advantage of some of those things so that you can be more effective in the modern age?
Exactly. And the difference, Ben, to previous times, let's say when we moved, from mainframes into PCs, or when we moved from data centers to the cloud, is that in the previous period, the velocity and the speed of change was manageable. We had time to adapt. We had time to evolve. You and I went through that period, right? When we were clickety-click on servers, and then we had to adapt. The difference now is that speed is significantly higher. That velocity is significantly higher. Many leaders are struggling to catch up. Many leaders feel that they don't have the time to adapt, to normally evolve into the leader that they need to be for this day and age. So the leadership development industry needs to step up and say, okay, this is different. It's not the same as the previous years. This is totally different, so much faster. We need to move at a different pace, even in the learning and development arena.
Okay. Well, we also highlighted this in the title. It's the 5 human competencies. So from my understanding, you've sort of boiled down what this modern leadership change is into 5 competencies that we all need. Shall we step through them now?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I tell you what, shall we list all 5 and then we'll dip into each one and maybe unpack each one. So what are those 5 competencies of a modern leader?
Well, I call them the 5 I's because, as an engineer, I like simplicity and I like acronyms as well. And before I tell you the 5 I's, this came from research. This came from research, both a survey I did on leadership teams, but also through my own coaching conversations with leaders. So it's not just something that just came up from the top of my mind, right? So this is evidence-based.
Okay.
This is what people said that they need from their leaders. So the 5 I's are insight, integration, inspiration, integrity, and impact. These are kind of the competencies that we need. And another dimension to look at this, insight, integration, inspiration, integrity, and impact.
Okay.
And how do these manifest to the self, to the leaders themselves? How do they manifest for the team? And how do they manifest for the entire organization, for the system?
Okay. Well, should we unpack that? Because as I sort of think of those words, I think, that could mean a million things. So I'm not sure I really know exactly what these all mean yet. So, shall we dig into the first one? So should we start with insight?
Yes. And I'll give you an example what insight means. I'm coaching leaders in many different industries, and the leaders are telling me, our teams, I'm pushing my team, they need to use AI, without really understanding why. So insights is really making the connection between the technology and what the team or the organization really does. There was a recent MIT study, I think a couple of months ago, that said that 95% of all AI pilots fail. 95% of all AI pilots fail. That is worrying and scary. 95%. And if you look at the detailed report, it says that a key reason is that the leaders in the organization cannot make the link for people. They cannot give the insight about how exactly and why do we need to use these things. Somebody on LinkedIn recently just told me to a post, as they responded, they said, people architecture is also important in organizations, right? So if people don't get it, the AI adoption efforts will fail. So insight is really about, can you make the link for people between the technology and their work?
Yeah. Okay. And it's interesting, I've been in lots of conversations with people where they've been told, particularly working with the data folks, right? We need an AI strategy, right? Okay. But what's the problem we're trying to solve? Doesn't matter. We just need an AI strategy. So what you're sort of saying there is, what is the problem that we're going to solve, or what's the benefit that we're going to bring to our work and our day to day, which is just this is good old fashioned leadership, right? What's the problem? This is how we're going to solve it, as opposed to here's the solution. Now let's find a problem for it. So you're just saying it's understanding that problem and then being able to turn that into, this is how we're going to fix it with this technology, and bridging that gap.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you a secret. Don't tell anyone. Okay. These competencies, they're nothing new.
Okay.
Right.
We've blown the title out of the water then. This was modern leadership.
It is. We need to use the same competencies that we've used, but we need to put a different focus on them. We need to reframe the competencies. You will find ancient wisdom in these competencies. It doesn't mean that we need to invent new ones. But if this is so simple, why are leaders failing at this? Why are leaders failing to ask the why question? So the inside competency comes and says to the leader that we're training, take a pause, stop and ask the questions that you just asked, Ben. Why do we need this? I call it, remember in the COVID period where many people were just stacking mountains of loo rolls, right?
Yeah.
Toilet paper, right?
Yeah.
I say the same for AI, right? We purchase AI. We've never created the insights for the organization of this is why we're doing this. We're not doing this because everybody else is doing it and we feel we've been left behind. We're doing this because it makes sense. And many organizations really want to go beyond the let's run a pilot or let's run an experiment to really using AI and allow it to take off in real life, right? None of these competencies are anything new, but the focus on them needs to be different. And think about, again, on that insight, how does it manifest in those three layers? How does it manifest for the leader? Well, the leader is leading the organization. The leader needs to reflect and say, okay, what is my role here? How do I create this meaning for people? How do I create this connection between AI and how it will really help the job evolve? How will it really help the business? Right? So they need to do their own reflection. The team needs to reach a level of cohesion about how they're using it. AI literacy is very important these days, right? So how do we make sure that we are cohesive in how we are operating as a team? And when you're thinking of a CEO, a CIO, a COO, what is the job architecture they need to create for the organization? Because if the job architecture isn't there, I often use this analogy. It's like putting a GPS on a horse and carriage. If you're using ancient architecture for your organization, putting some AI on top of it, are you really doing anything?
Okay. So insight, it's all about connecting the business problem or the problems to the technology and being able to bridge that gap and explain that complexity. And that might be explaining it up to your leadership team. That might be explaining it down to your direct reports, if you've got direct reports, or across to other people in other departments, if that's how you function.
And inside and inwards as well.
And inwards.
Reflection. What is my role here as a leader?
Yeah. Okay. And
this is where coaching really helps.
Let's move on to the next one. So we've done insight. What's the next one?
Integration. Okay. And integration is how do we lead with technology instead of being led by technology? How do we really integrate it in what we are doing? You see the articles, you see the news, even to this day, 5,000 people laid off, 15,000 people laid off, on the guise of, well, we're laying people off because of the opportunities that AI introduces. Well, hold on. AI can augment. AI can help evolve the roles. AI doesn't need to replace necessarily. So how do we integrate AI and lead with it instead of just letting it take over? So it's about experimentation for the leader. What experiments can I run? I see leadership teams all day long, and I love it, going on offsites, as like leadership team offsites, and saying we went on this mountain and we spent the weekend creating agents, just experimenting themselves. You can no longer have a leader that is just a people manager, a people leader, and not doing the experiments themselves as well. So you need AI savvy leaders, and many organizations, Microsoft, Google, they're introducing leadership courses about AI. Right?
And so So you're almost talking about building the technical capability of a leader there. So what sort of technical capabilities are you saying that they need to have? I mean, do they need to be able to, go onto your cloud platform and start firing up engines and understanding how that data needs to be engineered so that it's, are you talking about that level, or what level are you talking about when you talk about this integration?
It could be. What my favorite topic these days is rapid prototyping. Right? And rapid prototyping is really something that can operate at many different levels. You have a team manager that would like to create a prototype and a proof of concept about a new approach to the data handling. You might have a marketing leader that would like to prototype a marketing idea, so not necessarily a technical solution. You can have a CEO or a business leader that would like to prototype a business idea and see how that might do out there in the business. So rapid prototyping, in my opinion, is the next level of experimentation. So this is where we lead the industry. This is where we lead the business with AI. We use it as a tool. Unfortunately, these days, we get so distracted by GPTs and large language models, and we forget that AI is so much more than just the exciting, I'll be honest, and interesting GPTs and large language models. You can use so many different things. So rapid prototyping is a great example of how a leader can get their team together, leadership team together, and start to integrate AI in the decision making, not simply replacing. Or I hear many HR leaders say, well, we can create digital twins of people in the future. Well, is that the most interesting thing you can do with AI? Look at pharma. Is starting to create off-grid farms of energy just to support their own energy needs. They don't even need to tap into they don't need that conversation about AI data centers, they're using water, they're using energy. Well, they're starting to use none of it because they're developing the solar and wind farms that will just create all of it, right? So if we see past all the nuances about all the bad things that we need to be aware of that AI can bring, and we start to see how can we really integrate it, that is that competency. The ability to think, how do we really integrate it into the flow of the decision making that we have as leaders, into the flow that the team has when are they AI first, as they're thinking of new ideas, if they're thinking of new products. I'm sure many of your customers are thinking about this. And if you think about it for the whole system, for the whole organization, what does integration mean? Well, have you put in the governance? Or can people just fire up things and nobody knows? How do you avoid the kind of black market innovation that is happening in many organizations? Can you put on the checks and balances in the organization so that integration doesn't just go completely Wild West?
Yeah. So as I sort of think about what you said so far, so we start with insight, and so that's like finding the problem, and then thinking about, right, how do we now talk about that to people? Here's the problem. And then you've moved on now to integration, which is, and now actually let's take some ownership for some experiments, maybe some rapid prototyping. And actually we don't need to wait for 1 million people to say yes. We can actually just start with a bit of experimentation without going too black market and getting yourself in trouble. But you've generated a problem, you've got some insight, and now you're going to start to rapidly experiment with it.
Exactly. Which then brings us to the third I, which is inspiration.
Okay. So what does that mean?
Well, inspiration, think about the change management. And many people forget that AI adoption is also about managing the change of people, right? So change management, if you think of the ADKAR model, for example, which is...
I'm so glad you brought that up, because we did a whole episode on it just a few weeks ago. So there you go.
Yeah. So important, right? So you have, what is the A? Awareness, right? Do I know what is happening? What is D? is desire, right?
Yeah.
And inspiration sits on that D part of the change management, that desire. So yes, as a leader, I created the experiment. I'm excited about this. But is the team excited about this? Is the team inspired about this? I'm coaching people that are really stressed about it. Does your audience, have you ever talked about this acronym, the FOBO? Have you talked about FOBO in this podcast before?
I don't think I have.
FOBO. I love FOBO. It's the fear of becoming obsolete.
Okay.
Right? I love it because it's a real thing. It's a real fear that people have. So imagine that you're sitting there, you're reading all the fear mongering and all the negative articles on, LinkedIn and Facebook about how AI is replacing everything, and you're really concerned about your role. And your leader comes in and says, I'm excited. Let's do this AI thing. You're not reading the room, right, Mr. or Mrs. Leader? You're really not, you're tone deaf. So how do you inspire the team? How do you have that conversation about, and even surface people's FOBO, if there is? You cannot just go and say, I'm excited, let's do AI. The sky's the limit. Hold on. Meet people where they are. There's the change curve. Again, this is not new things, but we need to reframe it in the context of AI. The fact that the leader is excited because they attended a conference or they did their offsite doesn't mean that their people are equally as excited. So how do you create that inspiration? And again, on those three layers, the self, the team, and the system, the organization, how does that manifest as a leader? Well, you need to be authentic. Right? You need to be authentic. You need to show that you're practicing. You need to show that you're experimenting yourself, but also be authentic about the challenges. Acknowledge, recognize that it's not that simple as we're all excited about AI. But be authentic about it. In the team level, talk to them, have a dialogue. Don't just say, we need to do this, I'm excited, let's go. Listen to them. What are their concerns? What are they afraid about? Right? Give them some support. And when it comes to the organization level, well, it is about the culture, right? If you're the leader, if you're the leadership team, if you're responsible for the culture of the organization, you can make it a culture that is rather toxic in its expectation to deliver AI. I was reading this article, Ben, recently, that some really big consulting organizations have put a requirement for promotion that is a metric of AI usage. What a terrible, terrible idea. Making usage of AI a requirement for a promotion. What is the culture that this creates? It's not a great culture. So what is the culture that will really inspire people? What is the culture of experimentation? What is the culture of saying to people, give it a shot? What does it mean, AI first? Right? So
and it's interesting.
Is very important.
Yeah, and I'm just sort of thinking like that FOBO. I'd not heard that term before. I really like it. So that fear of becoming obsolete, and it's interesting because as I apply this to what we're talking about today, there's two ways that suddenly spring out to me. The first way is, well, as a leader, right, you've got to adapt, because what you've done before isn't what you need to do to succeed. So maybe you now need to be thinking about experimenting with AI and stuff like that, which maybe you've never done before because you've been running one-to-ones or you've been doing whatever you've been doing as a people leader, for example. So firstly, there's that you've got to be up for adapting. Second thing, maybe for the team that you're leading, they're going to have to adapt. Just the last episode I did was all about how that's changing in software engineering and what the current modern skills for a software engineer are versus what they were before. And it makes me think of the Industrial Revolution, like where if you were in the textiles industry, you needed to be really good at weaving, let's say, for example, and that's a very hands-on thing with thread and you need to weave. But suddenly in the post-machine world, you now need to be a machine operator. And the skills to be a machine operator are very different to the skills that you need to be a weaver. And do you want to be a machine operator when you used to be a weaver? That's the other thing, isn't it? Because the skills are changing so much. Actually, is this thing that you're doing now, is this what you want to do? Or do you actually now want to do something else because those skills that you've got are now more relevant to this other thing rather than the thing that you do? It's quite interesting times, I think.
They are. And I use that example very often, and you're spot on. The difference is that in the industry revolution and even in the cloud revolution, you had a few years to adapt.
Yeah.
Now you have months. That's the primary difference, right? People had years to move from one mindset to the other mindset. They had the industrial kind of the move from mainframes to PCs happened roughly over a decade.
Yeah.
It took about 10 years, right? I remember we were not talking when we were back in Microsoft, we were not talking about Copilot 3 years ago. It wasn't a thing, right? It was AI was, the AI team was talking about it, but it was dizzying how fast the whole thing came, right? That's the primary difference. And this is where people are struggling, and leadership development and leaders need to step in. There's no time for this adjustment to happen just organically because the change is too fast.
Yeah. Okay. And so inspiring yourself and inspiring the team to want to constantly adapt, that's a key part of modern leadership.
Yeah.
Let's move on. We're time is escaping us, so let's move on. What's the fourth one?
Well, it's integrity, and it's not difficult to comprehend because it's about governance. It's about knowing the law, knowing the rules, but also the ethics of it. I give this very simple example. There are many people, many of our listeners, including myself, that you go to ChatGPT, to Gemini, to your AI of choice, and you write a prompt. You're not overthinking it, right? And you get the response, and then you give it a response, and then 30 minutes later you get frustrated, and you've had a very long conversation. Every time you adjust your prompt, you're using resources, you're using energy, you're using water, and yes, it is becoming more efficient, but it's still using resources. So, training yourself and training your team and your organization into prompt engineering is actually responsible AI. By people knowing how to use it better, they're using less resources. And I think that's a very strong example of how we need to have integrity in the use. Just buying tons of it and making it people use it, even that metric I mentioned before, uses of AI. Well, hold on. Are you just burning down forests to just meet a metric, right? So this is really integrity. The ethics and the responsibility of using AI properly. Yeah.
And inspiring other people to do that as well. So taking people on a bit of a journey so that everybody thinks it's not just about how do we cut costs, how do we do this new business model, but how do we create a world where we want to be in. Where the data that it's trained on isn't biased and recommending all kinds of horrific things.
Most big tech organizations, and not just tech organizations, big organizations that are properly using AI, they have an ethical review board.
Yeah.
Is this the right thing to do? Can AI do it? Yes. Should it? Let's talk about it.
Okay. And so it's baking that. Should we do this? Baking that in to all the decisions that you make every day.
Ethics.
Love it. And then the final one. What's the final?
The final one. It's making sure that there's impact. That's the final I. So we've gone from insight, integration, inspiration, integrity, and then we go to the impact. Again, I think we covered it in the beginning as well. What is the problem we're trying to solve? What is the challenge? What is the opportunity we're trying to manifest? What is the impact here? Is it really making an impact? Remember where I talked about the MIT study, 95% of AI pilots fail. Fail what? Fail to produce any measurable impact, right? what can we measure? We need to measure what really matters in everything. Not just introduce it, but what is AI doing? So the leaders, as they go to their team and their organizations, should go beyond, are we using it? And they need to start saying, okay, what is the impact of this? What is the impact of the team? What is the impact of the organization? And my new also favorite word is stewardship. What is the impact to the world? Especially with all the layoffs. What are you really doing here? You're using AI, your company is more effective, but what are you doing to the social fabric? What are you doing to the trust?
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you do have to balance that a little bit. I mean, maybe it feels like we're being a bit down on AI. And so to be honest, I am quite a fan of AI. And there are two things that I find that it helps me do. And one is do things quicker. And the second thing is do things to a higher standard. So I can do things to a higher standard more quickly. And there's very specific things, use cases that I use where I feel that really helps me do that. So that's really good. I've been working with some folks that are trying to talk about how AI, the impact that AI is having on their organization. And I don't know if it's the same company that you're working that you've talked to, but it's a very same approach. Whereas the example you used, they have people being promoted because of their usage of AI, not their impact of AI. Same with this company that I'm working with, where they can tell you all about the adoption rates. They can tell you all about peak usage, all about how the AI that they bought is being used. And they've got some amazing data points. They haven't got one story about how it's been useful. And the thing that that everybody keeps saying is, meeting transcripts. We've got meeting transcripts and auto-generated actions. And you go, right, brilliant. And then you ask the next question, is anybody having a problem forgetting the actions that they've got? Everybody's hand goes up because now they don't remember committing to it. They've never read the notes. They've never read the transcripts. And now there's about 50 actions assigned to them that they didn't even know about and have got no emotional connection to whatsoever. So it's really interesting. It's going back to that, right, what's the impact of this? How do we measure impact? And for me, adoption and usage rates is not impact.
Well, think of an impact as a pyramid, right?
Okay.
And on the top of the pyramid, you have the elusive ROI, which comes with a dollar amount or a pound amount, right? How much money did I make as a commercial organization as a result of this, right? So adoption rate, you're measuring here on the bottom, right? Do people like it?
Yeah.
Are people using it?
Yeah.
Right? It's important. You need to track this, right? But is that enough? So if people look at this as a pyramid and they say, okay, we need some metrics, some measurements here on the bottom, but we need some observations, is it, so people like it. Are we noticing a change in their behavior? Are they changing the way they work? That sits somewhere in the middle of that pyramid, right? And after you have noticed the changed behavior, how is this affecting the business? Are we selling more? Are we answering more support calls? And before we're selling more, because we're selling more or because we're answering more support calls, are we more efficient? And is that leading to higher revenue? If you're a chief transformation officer, if you're a chief technology officer, you cannot just stay at the bottom of the pyramid, which says, well, people like it, people use it. We won the award inside the organization. Our team, we won the award. We got the trophy in Las Vegas in the company offsite or whatever. So what? Show me the ROI. Show me that the business is better off because of that, right? So impact, the ability to be able to go back to the organization and your CEO and your board of directors and say, here's the impact of what we did. And the ability for a team to do that to the team leader. Here's the impact that AI had. Otherwise, congratulations, you successfully created a habit.
But maybe not a good one.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. But usage is just a proof that you created successfully. You helped create a new habit for people.
Yeah. So we've got those 5 I's. Now, you've mentioned this a couple of times as you've been going through this, that you can apply these at different levels. So you can apply them to yourself. So how do you, what different levels can you apply these at?
Yeah. I figured there are 3 levels: to yourself as a leader. So looking inward. How do I create insight for myself? How do I integrate technology? How do I let technology lead with me instead of me? How do I keep myself inspired? Can I really be authentic if I'm not inspired about AI? If I have a FOBO? How can I lead people with their FOBO if I have FOBO? Right? How do I make sure that I use AI responsibly? And how disciplined am I about asking the impact question? So the first layer is inward looking to the leaders themselves. The second one, as a leader, how can I do this with a team? How can I create the team norms around AI, the team standards? And then if you're responsible for the systemic context, if you're responsible for a big part of the organization, or you're the owner, the founder, or the CEO of the organization, how you do that on a systemic and even societal impact, the impact that the company and the usage of AI has on resources, on energy, on water, and stuff like that. So inward self, team level, and at the system level. The same 5 competencies, the same 5 I's. Look at it as an X and a Y, right? And where do you sit in that table?
Yeah. Fascinating. Do you know what? I've just glanced at the clock, and sadly, Panos, I think our time here is rapidly coming to an end. Could you summarise? What would be the key takeaways from the conversation we've had today?
The key takeaways is keep those 5 I's in your mind and the 3 dimensions as a table, and you can self-assess. Right? These are not new things. I'm not suggesting something that I invented, but I am saying that we need to use that ancient wisdom, that wisdom of leaders, and put it in the context of today's challenges. We don't need a new set of competencies, but we need to realize that these 5 competencies are most important in this day and age, right? And
just remind us of those 5 I's. Just remind the 5 I's one last time.
Insights, integration, inspiration, integrity, and impact.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. And the other bit that I've really loved that's come out of this is FOBO. I had not come across that before, so fear of becoming obsolete. But I will definitely reuse that, because I see that all the time, and I feel that myself, right? And you feel it like, we're both parents, like bringing up the kids. How do you bring them up to be well equipped to succeed in the modern employment world? We don't want them obsolete before they've even left school, sort of thing. So it's this fear of becoming obsolete. I'd not come across that before, and I really like it. So thank you for that. So. Now, if people have loved what you've been talking about, want to get in touch with you, how can people get hold of you?
Well, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Panos Malakoudis. I'm happy to connect over there. They can visit my website, which is citiumsolutions.co.uk. I'm sure we'll provide all the links. And they can also find me on Forbes, because I'm writing articles for the Forbes Coaches Council. And all this approach, we'll share the link. I've written an article about all those 5 I's and about this approach.
Brilliant. So I'll pop all of those in the show notes. So feel free to go into the show notes, and I'll pop all of those in. I will say, over the years, I have struggled with the spelling of your name at times, Panos. Particularly, we've not used your full name, but I remember learning to say your full name, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is Panagiotis Malakoudis.
Yes. 20 characters, the whole thing. I mean, I don't
trying to spell that was a challenge for me. So I shall make sure that goes in the notes so that we can get all of that right. So final thing for me to say is, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak to us.
It was for me too, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Don't go yet. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and rate the show. It really helps us grow and book new great guests. And remember, if the podcast isn't enough for you and you want weekly microlearning delivered straight to your inbox, sign up to the Tech World Human Skills Weekly. Head over to www.techworldhumanskills.com to sign up.